Welcome back to the Lanterne Rouge Cycling Podcast. If you're watching on YouTube, if you're continuing on podcast players, thanks for sticking with us. This is the recap of the women's Liège-Bastogne-Liège. Really interesting race that we just watched really early. Great time, these women's races. If you're in Australia, maybe not so good in America, but it finishes at a civilized time. 140 Ks, same last, I would say, 40 Ks plus as the men's race. They go from Bastogne to Liège, but the finale you really need to know about is the Redoute, 2 Ks, 9%, 35 Ks from the finish. They then have Rolly section, and then they have the Côte de la Roche-aux-Faucons, I think 13 Ks from the finish. Boncel straight after, then the 11 Ks descent, flat run into Liège, that you know the full sang sort of descent 2019, and they had it last year as well. So favourites, you know all the big names, Van der Breggen. Omissions, probably just Diagnan, last year's winner, and Grace Brown, who came second. But Benji, live coverage started with 47 Ks to go. What was the race situation? I think Benji's SD Worx new DS, from the sound of it, once he tells us what happened.
So basically, we expected some teams to try and put themselves in a better position by having a pawn in the breakaway to force other teams to pace in the peloton. We saw that in Liège-Bastogne with the likes of Trek doing so. And now, well, we said that SD Worx should do this because they haven't done it too much throughout the season. I think in Strade Bianche they tried as well with Fisher Black, and they did it again today. So that was great to see because this basically forces other teams to try and take control in the group behind and have them pace that rider from SD Worx back. And Fisher Black is honestly a really good rider. And the advantage of teams like SD Worx and Trek is that next to their very strong leadership, they also have pretty strong secondaries. And those outsiders, they can do some damage. And if you have a Fisher Black in the breakaway, then you can force Trek to need a 3-woman train at the front of the group to try and slowly but surely thin down the gap and catch Fisher Black again. And that's what they tried to do, and that's basically what they did by the foot of La Redoute, but it certainly did some damage. And with Trek also missing Ruth Winde here, who was unfortunately a close contact before the race with a COVID person, well, she was unable to come at the start, so that's one person that they're missing in this potential chase, and one pawn that they can't use in the race that had to be taken out. But all in all, very strong move by Fisher Black, very clever. It brought Trek into spending energy mode, and they unfortunately
it's what Trek did to them at Flesh.
Yeah, exactly.
They just did the same again. But brought back before Redoute. Who attacked first on Redoute? They brought it all back. It was SD Worx again, right?
Yes, I think we had an attack of pretty much 3 women at that point. At the starting point of La Redoute, we saw that Moulin Passia was moving up, and Moulin, we saw her attack in Liège-Bastogne early as well. That didn't really work out, but in this situation, they still had the numerical advantage if she attacked, so she had the option of doing so at the start of La Redoute, and she did so. Cavalli reacted, and also Alrud for the team of Movistar, Cavalli for FDG, obviously. And those 3 women had a bit of a gap, and we saw them hammer it up La Redoute from the first section, but we also saw that, well, Montpassio is a pretty damn strong rider, that is very certain, and she was able to, first of all, drop Cavalli, because Cavalli is decent at climbing, but she's not up there with the other 2. And Alrud was strong already this Ardennes portion of the season, so she was able to hold on a bit longer with Momon, but eventually that really didn't work out either. But we saw a response once Cavalli was taken out in the second group again, and that was from a teammate, right?
Yeah, FDJ, a bit curious, attacking with Cavalli. I'm pretty sure Cavalli should just look at what Marianne Vos does in every single race and try and copy that. She's the same style of rider, in my opinion. FDJ attacked with Ludwig, and this is what we said she needs to be doing, attacking early on La Redoute, not waiting for the last climbs, because she isn't the best sprinter, and she isn't the best climber either, if we're going to be honest, on these climbs compared to AVDB and Van Vleuten and Longo-Borghini. She reminds me a lot of Bauke Mollema, actually, and she needs to attack at the right moment. She's good enough to win if the other teams finesse and don't chase. And so it was a really good move from her. Fantastic move, actually. Really liked seeing her doing that. On Redoute, no one immediately reacted. She goes up the road, I think she was then joined. No, she caught Moolman. Moolman joins on with her. Moolman, by the way, like Zwift World Champion, right? On a pure specular basis, top class. So it's no surprise she's so good uphill. She has been for ages. And then they get to the top of Redoute. The favourites have had a few skirmishes behind, like Longo-Borghini, Van Vleuten, Niewiadoma, but no real big attacks. And it's Brand for Trek bridging across. So we've got two secondary riders in the group of three ahead and one pure leader with Ludwig on this ridge line above La Redoute. Vos is desperately trying to close that gap, which may be a mistake in hindsight, because the group swelled behind, got really big again with no one really taking up the chase. And those three riders working together, I think, with about, it was over 20 Ks to go. I think about 27 Ks to go. They had a 15-second gap. They had 3 Ks to the next small climb, the Côte des Forges. Moulin-Passio started sitting on and finessing, which I didn't really get it, because if the point of her being there was to be a satellite rider, which is why Brand was in that group, then wouldn't you want to make it to Roche-aux-Faucons ahead so that if AVDB or Van Vleuten bridge, you can be there and be caught, just like when Ludwig caught her. But anyway, she was finessing, not pulling on the flat. Brand was pulling like 80%. They didn't close them on that climb, the Fourche. Canyon Shram were doing a lot of the pacing with Shabby, I think, doing a lot of it for Niewiadoma. 20 Ks to go, they're closed down before Roche-aux-Faucons. And Chantal van der Broek-Black is still in the group. She moves to the front for SD Worx, who've been on the front foot all day in this race. She's got Van der Breggen on her wheel, Vollering in the group, Nie Fischer-Black in the group. They basically got the whole team in the group. And Roche-aux-Faucons starts the hardest climb in this race. I think, 1.9 Ks, 1.2 Ks, 11%. I think it says on my profile. Pretty steep and nasty, just like the Murderwee. Van der Breggen starts pacing the minute they get there at a steady pace, no attack. She doesn't even look behind her, pacing. And it's clear the strategy for SD Worx is we are not going to have a repeat of Amstel Gold Race. We are going to drop Marianne Vos, and we don't care if Longo-Borghini, Van Vleuten, and Niewiadoma are in this group, as long as we have Demi Vollering. So already that was a big sign that SD Worx were riding for Demi Vollering. Van der Breggen not attacking, basically pacing for herself. Vos is holding on. 150 meters to go. She just starts dropping. Ludwig, she drops herself, basically. Benji, do you think she could have held on to G1 if she rode more conservatively?
I think so, because we saw her make a bit of a move on the left side of the road there on that Roche-aux-Faucons, and that's not the kind of move you do when you're relatively near the limit. And I think it was a bit of an all or nothing move eventually, because that immediately dropped her back to the back of the group, and she started suffering as much as Marianne Vos was doing in the last 150 meters. And they both cracked with that tiny margin to the top. But the thing is, this is not done when you reach the top of Roche-aux-Faucons. You've got a tiny descent, and then we go back onto a bit of a false flat section before we have a hill once again. And the problem is, if you drop already here, then you're likely to drop just after. And we kind of expected that to happen then. I did, at least. And we come to the top of Roche-aux-Faucons. We have the gap on Marianne Vos. Not that large. 15 seconds, 10 seconds, I think. It wasn't large. And
10
this
max.
Is where SD Worx started to make a tiny mistake, I think. Because we saw that Moulin-Passio was on a good 5 seconds behind that group at the front. And then Marianne Vos another 10 seconds behind that, roughly. Let's say that's the gaps, roughly. This means that, well, SD Worx at the front needs to make the decision. Either we keep on pacing like this, or we wait the 5 seconds that Moulin-Passio needs to come back to this group, and then we start pacing. And at the start, they didn't make that decision, but then they did. And they waited for Moulin-Passio. Vollering stopped pacing. Moulin came to the back of the group, and I expected her to move forward, move to the front of the group, and just keep on pedaling, because she needed to, because Marianne Vos is coming behind. She's coming back, and they didn't. Moulin-Passio just stayed at the back, and I don't get it.
They left it up for Niewiadoma.
I don't get it. Yeah, it doesn't make sense.
That was, I thought they'd almost stuffed the race, because it was perfection on Roche-aux-Faucons from Van der Breggen. They got exactly what they wanted, and then Vollering started pacing, and I think I think Van der Breggen was like, Demi, why are you pacing? Like, we want you in the sprint. Anyway, all's well that ends well. As Benji said, there's no time to recover. Vos gets back with Ludwig, but by the time they get back, they're just getting onto this next climb, the Boncel, 1.2 Ks at 6.3%. It's got steep sections too. It's narrow, and then they've got a 10K descent/flat run into the finish, and Van Vleuten attacks on that Boncel climb. Van der Breggen was pacing, then Van Vleuten tried to attack. The fact that Van Vleuten couldn't get any purchase probably meant that pace from Van der Breggen was pretty high, and it drops everybody else pretty much. It's just those two. Van der Breggen sits on, Van Vleuten stops her action because of Van der Breggen's presence, and it allows Vollering, Niewiadoma, and Longo-Borghini to catch back up. Vos gone, Uttrup Ludwig gone, and Mulman gone, not helping those two, Vos and Ludwig, obviously. And you got to remember, Vos has gone pretty deep into the well now for the last 20 minutes almost to catch back up. And now Van der Breggen, I mean, she just gets on the front now with this group and puts it into fifth gear and doesn't take it off, 350 watts, I think, for the next 10 kilometers, Benji. They didn't care about Longo-Borghini, Van Vleuten, and Niewiadoma in this group. They got Vollering there. We saw an Amstel Gold race. I'll show you the finish I've shown you in the YouTube video and in the pod. Vollering hit the line super hard. She's clearly the second best sprinter out of this group of G1 and G2 after Vos, and they've dropped Vos, so they're not concerned by the others. So they bring that gap out with Van der Breggen pacing to 30 seconds. Vos is gone. We know it's going to be from the front group. The question is, will Van Vleuten, Niewiadoma, and Longo-Borghini, what will they do? You can't go to the line with Vollering, but do you have any choice? Based on Amstel Gold Race, I would have thought Elisa Longo-Borghini would have attacked because she doesn't trust her sprint. But anyway, Van der Breggen paces, headwind, they turn right into the final kilometre from this group of five. In order, got Van der Breggen on the front, Niewiadoma second wheel, not in a good spot, Van Vleuten third wheel, Vollering fourth wheel, Longo-Borghini's moved back to be fifth wheel. Van der Breggen increases the pace, perfect lead out, and drops. It's actually better when you've got Vollering fourth wheel to drop the other riders off a little bit early, and that's what happened into this headwind. You've got Van Vleuten start her sprint early on the right-hand side around Niewiadoma, but Vollering's right on her wheel, gets the slipstream, and begins her sprint to the middle and wins by over a bike length ahead of Van Vleuten second, who was able to hold it, and Longo-Borghini third, beating Niewiadoma in the sprint, Van der Breggen fifth, then Vos winning the reduced bunch behind. What'd you make of that finale, Benji? Picture perfect tactics, just about, almost in the last 30 Ks by SD Worx.
Yes, almost, but we can't look at that too much because they basically did what we thought they would or hoped they would do to try and take this race home with Demi Vollering. We said at the start of the season that Demi was moving up in the rankings, coming from Park Hotel, doing really well at these Ardennes last year, and well, she stepped up again this year, and she's not at the level yet that she's going to dominate it yet, because we said she could replace the likes of Van der Breggen or Van Vleuten in the ranks in the future. I don't feel like we're at that level yet, but she's definitely nearing it. I feel like on the climbs itself, she sometimes does look that she has trouble hanging on to, for example, a move by Van Vleuten on the latter section just after the Roche-aux-Faucons, where that attack was coming. That's where I was
She got dropped on Boncel,
yeah, exactly. That's just the point where I'm like, ooh, this needs to be a tiny bit better if you want to dominate these races in the future. But she's already at such a level where she has the advantage of having a sprint, so she doesn't necessarily need to drop all the others in the process. She just needs to drop Vos, and they did that today. And while they made that tiny mistake in that descent portion that allowed Vos to come back, perhaps they knew that the section afterward was tough enough. But then again, it was Van Vleuten who actually formally dropped Marianne Vos afterwards to a point where she could not come back. I think that it was a good race. I really enjoyed it, and I'm really happy to see that Demi Vollering is finally getting that deserved victory I was hoping for the entire season so far. And it came just when we hoped it would, on the on paper most important classic, Ardennes Classic at least.
Well, the thing is, I mean, it's not like Anna van der Breggen was like, oh, wouldn't it be great if I just give someone else on my team a victory? This was the best way for SD Worx to win this race. The sprint of Vollering without Vos being in the group is the trump card, because Van Vleuten and Anna van der Breggen, it kind of neutralize each other or nerf each other or cancel each other out, particularly when Van der Breggen, apart from Murderhui, I know that not been as like otherworldly dominant this year, just riding away from everybody. Kind of the same with Van Vleuten, too, apart from Flanders, obviously. Not doing it every race. So with those two marking at each other, well, I've got the teammate who's got the trump card sprint. And so perfect from Van der Breggen. She's going to make a great DS and tactician next year at SD Worx. Can't wait to see her make that transition. So you think, Benji, going back to the other riders that didn't win, Longo-Borghini, Niewiadoma, and Van Vleuten, was there anything they could do in the final 5Ks? There's no real pinches. It's all flat, bit of a headwind. I don't really think there is, because if Van der Breggen's going to come fifth in the group of five, you're basically losing out your chance of a podium of a monument if you attack, because you'll just get chased down.
Yeah, you're right. I think that in the latter portion, we saw Longo-Borghini make one split decision mistake in the last portion, where she decided to take over from Van der Breggen, who was pacing in the group in the last 5 kilometers. Was like, okay, you should be at the back right now, prepping your attack or sprint, whatever you're going to go for, but you should not be taking over from an SD Worx rider who is riding for Vollering. I didn't get that moment. She quickly realized that wasn't a good idea and went to the back again. But that was a tiny thing. I was like, okay. But when it comes to Van Vleuten, I'm curious. In general, she usually goes for multiple attacks, and now she went for that one attack after the top of Roche-aux-Faucons and Boncel. And I think perhaps the race would have been a slight bit different if she went for La Redoute already, if she tried to demolish the numerical advantage of the others there already. Because let's say that she goes on the move there. She goes early on La Redoute and she makes that move. And she does it again on not Roche-aux-Faucons, but perhaps Boncel. Would you still have Vollering, or would she have completely dropped on Boncel? Because now it was relatively close to dropping there. So
You're
I don't
right.
know. Perhaps Van Vleuten could be doing something more, but that's a hindsight thing. I would never have said in the race, I should have tagged her, even though I said it in the preview. But still, I think that's the one thing I'm like, perhaps that could go different, but it's not. I won't classify it as a mistake. I'll classify it as perhaps, that could have gone better.
No, you're right. Honing in on that, what Benji's talking about is Boncel. All the other riders, apart from Van der Breggen, are cooked. Van Vleuten attacks, and she stops her action after AVDB shuts her down and basically allows Vollering to come back into the group. Perhaps, what does she do then, Benji? If she keeps it going, does AVDB sit on? I think that was her plan. So it was tough for Van Vleuten. That's why SD Worx team strength today was perfect. Trek, definitely missing Ruth Winder, as we said at the top of the show.
Yeah.
She's been so strong in the Ardennes. One Brabantse Pijl, and Amstel was really, really good, as well as Flesh. So, yeah, tough for them without her, as well as Diagnan, Elisa Longo-Borghini. She should be pretty happy, I think, with podium spot in Liège, actually. But that was our women's Liège-Bastogne-Liège recap. Really enjoyable race. I'll have my highlight video up, hopefully today, if I can get to it quickly. There's a gap now before the men's race. But otherwise, give the video a like down below if you watched it. Give us a rating on podcast players if you haven't already, if that's where you listen. And what's next, Benji? Romandy coming up, I think.
Yes, Romandy coming up. And it's basically a preparation race for the Giro. And the Giro is the race I look forward the most every season, because it's my favorite Grand Tour, and it's arguably one of my 3 favorite races in the season. LBL wasn't that, but I still very much enjoyed the women's race. I don't know why. We should do a ranking the monuments video at some point, because
probably
people might be surprised with LBL being at the bottom of mine.
LBL, MSR. I don't like Tour of Flanders. Tour of Flanders at the bottom. All right. With Benji triggered, that's where we'll leave it today, and we'll see you with Romandy next week. Ciao.